on Russian and Jewish history all over the world. And he comes to us today primarily because of his incredibly powerful book, Who Will Write Our History. If you haven't read the book, many of you might have even watched the film, the film that came out about 2 years ago. I guess we screened it last year at our synagogue. And so we are so pleased to have the original author of the book, Professor Kassow, with us now. So thank you so much for being with us, Professor Kassow. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy Sunday. And I note that today is the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which, we're filming this or recording this interview this day for our community's Yom HaShoah observance beginning tomorrow evening. But there's something really fitting and appropriate, I think, in the timing of how this has all come to be. So thank you for bringing your knowledge, your insights, and your stories to us this day and forward. So I wondered, by way of beginning, if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit about your own background, your own personal story, your own academic background, kind of what led you to eventually write a book about Emanuel Ringelblum and the Oyneg Shabbos and its resultant archives.
Okay, well, in terms of my own personal background, I was born in Europe. My parents were Holocaust survivors. I was born after the war. I spent the first few years of my life in a displaced persons camp. I came to the States when I was a toddler, when I was 3 years old. My relatives who did survive the war survived through miracles, very dramatic, incredible, hard to believe stories, which I didn't find out about until much later, really, although I could sense right from the beginning that there was kind of a backdrop that wasn't very nice. I decided to become a historian, but because of the issues connected with the Holocaust, I made a decision that I would not have anything to do with Jewish history or the history of the Holocaust because it was too personal a subject. So I went into Russian history. I spent 2 years in the former Soviet Union in the 1970s. And the first 15 years of my writing was on Russian history. I wrote about the Russian universities, Russian intellectual history. And then when my parents passed away, and my father died in 1987, my mother died in 1994, I began to have an epiphany. That is, I began to understand that the history of the Holocaust, as it was being written in the United States and in Europe, not so much in Israel, but as it was being written in the US and Europe, really focused on the Germans, on the perpetrators. The Jews had no voice, they had no agency, they had no identity. One reason for this was, of course, that the Germans left a lot more documents. Two, that most historians who wrote about the Holocaust couldn't read Jewish languages. And therefore, it didn't matter whether these were great